Hi, this is Scott Moore from Scott Moore Consulting, and I want to show you how easy it is to use the new Neoload Citrix protocol. So one of the first things I would like to bring your attention to is using the no privilege mode of Neoload. So I've actually changed my shortcut on my desktop to reference that. And if you look at the location where the executables are installed for Neoload on Windows, you'll see a Neoload GUI.exe and this Neoload no privilege.exe. So if you have to deal with things like the UAC, DEP, any kind of non-administrator privilege problems that you have, by switching over to this no privilege mode, you're going to be able to use the Citrix protocol, and you don't have to deal with the security problems. It'll just run. Now, when you first launch this in no privilege mode, you don't have to right-click, click Run as Administrator. You just run it as a typical user. The very first time that you launch that, it could take a couple of minutes because it's having to load up all these DLLs that have to work around all those security privileges. But after the first time, it should launch quickly, exactly as you've just seen it happen here in this video real time. So we are going to create a new project called Citrix just to show off this feature. Once we've created our new project, we're going to create our first Citrix user path. Now, the difference between the way Neoload approaches recording an application and automating these applications is a bit different than the other commercial tools in the market that support Citrix. There's a lot of coding involved, either with C code, C# code, Java code. With this Citrix protocol, now for the first time, we can do this without a lot of code, especially if it's a straightforward recording. We now have an option up here about different types of protocols. We have web, SAP, and now Citrix. If we use that to get to the Citrix recording, that's the fastest way to get to the new Citrix tab here when you create a new recording. So you're going to notice a couple of things here. So this is a new tab that didn't exist before, and we're going to call the name of this the Citrix script. And we're going to record in actions, that's fine. But you'll notice we've got this connection type defaulted to storefront, but that is not the only choice. We also have ICA. So what is the difference between the two? When you choose an ICA option, it means that you have an ICA configuration file that is typically used on Zen app and Zen desktop on versions 6.5 and earlier. Most of your testing is most likely going to be on current versions of 7.x and higher, probably the long-term version support, which is a storefront-based application. Now, those of you familiar with Citrix and Zen app specifically, you'll know that that just means that there is a first web front end that you have to sign on to. And then once you launch a published application or a desktop, it sends you an ICA file dynamically, and that improves the security of your Citrix connection. What it does from a testing perspective, though, is it complicates things a little bit for us because now this is a dual protocol script, meaning the first time you launch this, it's going to launch a web browser. So you're going to be using HTTP traffic to capture this first login. From there, it will switch midstream into the ICA protocol or the Citrix session that you want. So if all of the other choices here are, we're going to just use the defaults, but if you had specific screen resolutions, or if you're looking to use a different language type other than this English translation data, what's been trained on for most applications in the US, you probably would want to change this if you've got different character sets and things of that nature, Asia Pacific, those type of character sets. So we're just going to launch this with the default and not change really anything in the advanced because it's not going to hurt anything to leave it like this. So for our purposes, let's just go ahead and launch this, and it's going to use the Chrome browser. You can set up which browser you actually want it to launch. by default. And notice that it doesn't take us to any individual page. This is not the actual storefront yet, because we want to put a transaction around that. So for right now, anything that has to do with the web storefront portal, I'm going to put portal underscore in front of it. So we want to go first to the home page. So everything that's underneath this transaction is what we're going to go to next. So let's do that. If you see anything in this video that's been blurred out, it's just to protect the information in the application, and you don't need to see it to understand what this demo is doing. But now we are at a login. Now this is the storefront, so we're at an HTML page, and you'll see that we are behind something called the NetScaler Unified Gateway. That is a rack-mounted device that most Citrix implementations and most people who use Citrix will understand what a NetScaler device is. It has a lot to do with security permissions, load balancing, and those session data. That's what it's used for. It passes that on to a web server or a load balance configuration of multiple web servers that do nothing but provide this login capability. So we're going to log in with our user ID. And before we click the login button, we are going to change the folder to the transaction folder to portal underscore login. Now, the next piece of this, I like to divide this up. You don't have to, but every little step that I take here, I like to document. So we're going to time clicking that button. From here, we want to open the receiver. This is the part where it's actually going to start connecting and pulling down that ICA file that has those definitions when you move over into the launcher. So we're about to step into ICA territory from HTTP territory as far as the protocol that we're using. Now it's going to hang until I agree and either try to detect it or say it's already installed. So what I'm going to do is put agree and already installed, because that's the choices that I'm going to make. Now once I do that, you're going to notice that this page launches. That is looking at the ICA file now. And I have a published application. This is a Allscripts application. It's a packaged application for EMRs, for hospitals and healthcare providers. So I'm logged in as myself on the storefront. The storefront gives me access to what applications I can see. This may be desktops. This may be specific applications. In this case, it is a published application, and if my ID had more access, the NetScaler device and the storefront would know that and pass that information onto this page, and I would see more icons here to choose from. So now we're away from the portal and we want to begin to launch the application. So I know that the next thing that's going to happen is we're going to launch the gateway for Allscripts. This is where the ICA file is pulled down and a session is launched. And you can see right there we have launched a session, and it's a desktop behind the scenes, but then you don't have to see the whole desktop to just get to the application. We're just going to give you access to the application. The way I like to describe that is sometimes when you're using sharing, screen sharing, it gives you the option to share your screen or to share just a particular app that you're looking at. From a security perspective, it might be better to just share a specific application or a region of your screen. That's kind of what's happening here behind the screen. So now we want to actually sign on to the Allscripts application. Now we are fully into Citrix. Before I do this, I want to show you the synchronization that we would want to use in case we're playing this back. it may not know that that screen isn't fully there, because you probably saw when it first launched there was a small little rectangular window in the middle that prevented us from seeing the username and password, and we want to make sure that that is already gone from the screen before we log in. So there are two things that we can synchronize to. When you're dealing with Citrix, you're looking at bitmaps. These are images that are sent to your screen very quickly to make it look like you are actually using the application, but you're sending mouse clicks, you're sending button clicks, you're sending text through typing in characters on a keyboard, and for that you're sending and receiving information, but all you're really getting back as a result of sending that input is bitmap screens. And so we have to synchronize in one of two ways. We have to visually synchronize to some kind of graphical piece of information, like I could sync on a rectangular area where I know it needs to be there before I move on, or I can use OCR technology, which would allow me to grab any area that has recognized text characters in there, and it will read that and convert that. It's sort of like when you scan or fax something, it can convert something that's a picture into text, and that's exactly what this does. So there's two ways to do that. Now you'll notice up here in my recording bar I do have a way to synchronize, and that's what this button is for. So the first thing I want to synchronize on is making sure that that screen, that rectangular area in this middle part of the screen where password is at, is gone, because once it's gone, then I actually can type in my login and password. So let's do that, and I'm going to be looking for this word password. So I could either do it as an image or I could do it as text. I'm going to click text, then I'm going to highlight this rectangular area where the word password is, and notice real time on the right it automatically detects the word password here. So if I insert that text, now I have a step in my user path that's going to wait until it can recognize password on the screen. Now, how good will this work? It works as good as the character recognition engine works. So if you have really strange fonts in your application, this could cause you a problem, and you may actually have to get some additional training into the OCR application. So as people begin to use this protocol, and we will find out how good that recognition engine is. So far, what I've used it for, it works great. The other thing that we can also do is the image, and I want to do that at the same time. So let's choose wait for image. Now notice it's already captured a screenshot for us of what was there during recording. So it's going to, when we sync on this, when it plays back, there's going to be a match that says, you know, the screen that I got back when I recorded, does it match what I'm seeing this time that I play this script back and I'm looking at it presently? So if the developers begin to change the visuals of the application, or even some of the more subtle features of colors, inverse of colors, changing something to dark mode, that is going to affect your scripts and will cause them to need to be maintained as well. But notice we also have a tolerance, whereas how well we want the, I guess how exact we want that match to be, pixel for pixel, hash value for hash value, or if there is any other tolerance. So we've got a default of high, but you can set that higher or lower if you want. So we are going to highlight this area where the password masking area starts here. And I have highlighted that, and I'm going to insert the screenshot wait. Now it's going to look for this to be available. So both of these now have to be true in order for this script to move forward with the rest of the recording. And the rest of the recording would be to log in. So let's do that. Now I could either click on the login button or I can hit enter. This is going to be a personal choice that you do, but the one thing I wanted you to realize is that if you have an application that is very picky and some screens are more difficult than others, it may be better for you to use keystrokes on the keyboard instead of mouse clicks, because sometimes buttons move around on the screen. As the resolutions change, things can move around. So if you can get to something using keystrokes, and those keystrokes will always take you to a certain place, in my opinion, that is a best practice to use, just to get the scripting done in a much faster time. So right now we know that we are on the main screen for all scripts, and now all we want to do is just log off. So we wanted to make sure that something on this screen was available. I could either insert another synchronization for this log off button, or I could look for some particular text that might be on the screen. So once the screen is here, let's go ahead and do the same thing. Let's sync on some text, and let's highlight this area right here. It auto-detects and sees that that is the column that says patient name. Another thing that I would recommend that you do is, if you're going to grab either text or a graphical image, if you have something where the top part of the screen paints very, very fast, but there might be other frames within the screen that are separate calls and it takes them a little bit longer to come back and render, try to grab something from the last rendering area. So typically that's going to be from the top left to the bottom right. I'm going to try to choose something here if I possibly can, because this is sort of an inner frame to the application. And also this portion on the very bottom, that may also be part of this outer shell, which may load very quickly, but I want to look for areas that might take the longest period of time. So that is what I'm going to recommend to you. There are other uses for grabbing text, converting images into text. There may be certain values that are numeric, or you may want to know which server that you're on. So once you grab that text, you might want to enhance your script later and send yourself some log message as you're running through the script that says, I was on this session with this username with this computer, and this was because in a Citrix farm you're going to have possibly dozens or even hundreds of XenApp servers that you may connect to, and there may be a couple in the farm that are a problem. So you might want to know, if the application tells you which one you're connected to, which one might be causing that problem or causing errors in your script. You may grab numbers that you may end up needing to convert over and do some kind of math with to figure out some kind of logistical issue. So I just wanted to mention that. So once that is there, we know we can push the log out button, or we could use the keystrokes to log out as well. So I'm just going to log out. Now I want to make sure this screen is there as well. I'm going to do another final capture, and this time I'm going to do an image, and I'm going to make sure that cancel is there. That would probably even be a good one for text as well. So I'm going to insert that screenshot. Once it's there, I'm actually going to click on cancel, and this shuts down the session for ICA, brings me back to the storefront, and finally I'm going to log off here. Now, one of the things you'll notice I didn't do during the rest of the script, because I was caught up in the synchronization, is when I was on different screens, I should have been changing the transaction name. From after I got through launch, I would go into once I got into the screen, whatever that login was, I would time the login, I would time the main screen, and any other things that I did in that application. So you want to make sure that you do that. So I'll probably end up having to re-record this script, but once I close this browser, Neoload recognizes that I'm done and launches the post-recording wizard. So one other thing I want to show you here is we don't want to go pulling from Google or other areas that are default things that the browser launches behind the scenes. We only want to use the domain on the HTTP side that affects what we are testing, and that's what you would do typically for a web application anyway. We also know that we are looking for the Citrix technology, so it knows this technology and they are going to help us find some dynamic things that typically these Citrix storefront applications have. And we are going to use the framework rules here. And one of the framework rules is Citrix. So I'm going to uncheck generic dynamic parameters, but I'm going to leave framework rules in place. When it looks for that, you will most likely see at least one value here. And this just saves you time as you're working with your script after the fact. And the biggest one is the cross-site security token here. So it finds that for you. You don't have to worry about that. That's something that in a lot of tools you have to do as well. We're just going to use recorded think times. We can always change that later, and then we're going to finish. Now we have an actual Citrix script, and you'll notice that there's nothing in init, and there's only one thing in end, which is disconnect. And the disconnect would happen even before end if the thing aborts for any reason. Something interesting about these Citrix scripts are, okay, I've got all these timings with all these web steps in here that were done, right? So I'll know which one of these happens. And then if there are any other dynamic values that I need to correlate, you would use your typical Neoload training to find these out. But notice that when I hit that all scripts launch gateway, there's no other steps, just mainly because of those folders. But if I expand that folder, I see this try. So everything after I pull that launching of the ICA file, and that's exactly what this is the launching of that ICA file. When I switch over to Citrix territory, everything else, all of those steps are now into try. So another thing to consider is that when you're recording those steps, all you really are doing are those keystrokes to log in. So your username, passwords, even sensitive data like that is going to be seen in clear text here in your script. If we complete all these steps with these delays like we have, then the script will run all the way through. However, if it doesn't, if the try doesn't work, the catch you can actually put additional steps in there to do what happens if it doesn't work. But as a last resort, if this does not work, if you don't catch any of the other errors, the final result will be a disconnect at that point. So anything that fails in here, it will default to this disconnect. And if it makes it all the way through, this is skipped, and then the next thing that you will have is an actual disconnect. If there are additional functions in here that you would like to add to the Citrix portion of this script, pretty easy to do. If you come down here to the Citrix protocol that's listed here, you can select any of these options here, and as you look at them, you'll be able to see a description of what they do. So if I were to, for example, let's just drag a mouse click up here to end just so we can see that step. As soon as I click on that, I can see the information about that. I can see all the named values of what the default is. I can fill those in. I could do all of this manually if I want to, and I can add additional values to this by using the plus and minus and go into more advanced features if I want. So the bottom line here is that I'm able to do this without very much code at all. If there is code that needs to be done, something that's special for yours, it has the capability of handling that. But the point is, you should be able to get your scripting done a lot quicker with the Citrix protocol, especially for straightforward workflows now and known packaged apps, especially if they don't have a lot of customization. You should be able to get through them very quickly, and that is really the value that I see in Neoload with this protocol, is that we want to get to testing quicker. When you're a consultant working on an engagement, you don't want all of the time being spent on the technical know-how of building correct scripts that are real world like, because that takes away, the longer that takes, it takes away from the time of the test execution. You want more time for test execution, because the more testing, the more possibilities of you finding issues, and that's what you want to spend your time on. So That's the demo of just the Citrix recording. We'll have another demo that shows the results of running a load test and what you see after the test that includes Citrix information in another demo. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope you agree this is a very good, it's a unique and fresh approach to handling Citrix, the Citrix protocol in a load testing capacity. Thank you.